Invasion of the Gore Empire by Felik. Activity in Anko was constant. Ships came and went between that port and Loomis, bringing soldiers, weapons, construction equipment, and materials. Also taking refugees to Loomis. Lucas knew the Gores would soon try to retake or destroy the port along with the town. Meanwhile, Luzbin was doing his best to assemble an army to carry out the Anti's orders. But he was worried. They had been able to capture the town of Anko in a single day. According to his spies, they were building walls around it with impressive speed. He had suggested doing this, but the Anti rejected the idea, believing it wasn't necessary to invest resources in it. He knew this was a mistake, but the Anti's authority was absolute, no matter how foolish his decisions were. Of course, he never voiced his opinions to others. He knew how dangerous it was to defy the Anti. To destroy those walls, General Luzbin ordered the newly constructed catapults to be brought in. He never thought the Gores would have to fight an invasion of their own territory. They had almost always been the victors, but these Felucides had proven to be formidable. So, he would assemble the largest army he could. Every day it took him to assemble the army. He received a visit from an officer from Chill City representing the Anti, urging him to hurry. The Anti wasn't known for his patience, after all. He was known for demanding immediate results. But in this case, its urgency was justified. Every day that passed was another day the Felucides had to build Anko's defenses. The army Luzbin was assembling was gathering in the city of Torma. He couldn't afford to fail his mission. His friend Swiro had gone out on a seemingly easy mission against Loomis, but the Anti himself had told him he'd been defeated, so he believed him to be dead. And even if he were alive, he couldn't afford to return, because the Anti punished failure with death. Even though the Vados were the ruling class of the Gores, they were subject to the whims of the Anti, whose family had ruled them with an iron fist for centuries. He decided to not use the talents. He still didn't understand the kind of power the Felucides held over them. 3 months later, the walls of Anko were finished. Trebuchets had been placed on the 3 towers, and both archers and crossbowmen were stationed along the walls. There were cauldrons of oil that would be boiled and poured out if the attackers reached the walls. This seemed cruel to Lucas, but they couldn't allow them to reach the walls. "Lord Lucas, a large Gore army is approaching," said a Kuni who had come up to him. "Thank you, Lanio. Good work monitoring them these past few days. Now I need the others to execute the plan as soon as the enemy gets close. Fire the signal now." One of the knights then ignited a small rocket, which shot swiftly into the sky, bursting into brilliant colors. This did not go unnoticed by Luzbin, who saw the multicolored explosion. Why did they do that? It's as if they wanted to announce their presence to the world. In reality, that was the signal 2 armies encamped north and south of Anko had been waiting for. It alerted them to the approach of an enemy army from the east. The northern army, composed of Teleras and reinforced by Akaros and Amazons, was led by Telendi. Meanwhile, the southern army, led by Deslet, was composed of Terids and mounted knights. Both armies gathered their equipment and began their march toward Anko. Both armies had Kunis at their service who indicated the enemy's relative position at all times. Therefore, they moved at a distance that prevented the enemy from seeing them, but closer than the enemy imagined. Luzbin would follow the tactic the Gores had always used, sending wave after wave of torch-bearing soldiers to set fire to the city gate and weaken it, but only if the catapults failed. However, something troubled him. His spies had reported seeing only slightly more than 100 soldiers guarding the newly constructed citadel, and 2 spies he had sent north and south had not returned. He knew something was wrong, but he could only stick to the tactics he had always used. The 6 catapults he had acquired were pushed by soldiers behind the main army. They were too fragile to allow enemy soldiers to approach them, so they were positioned behind their lines. The Gore army moved slowly but inexorably toward Anko. Then Deslet ordered his entire army to begin a forced march, almost galloping toward the enemy, all of them carrying long spears. Telendi also ordered a forced march. Both armies moved without breaking formation. When they became visible too, the Gore saw Deslet's army approaching and were terrified that it would start galloping toward them. They had never seen a cavalry charge and tried to block it as best they could with their swords and shields. Many Gore perished under the hooves of both Terids and horses. Occupied as they were with the cavalry, they did not see the rain of arrows falling upon them from behind, felling many. Luzbin's men turned and were terrified when they saw Telendi's army, now without arrows, running toward them with drawn swords. They were many, and their numbers prevented them from fighting effectively. Their swords and shoddy armor shattered before the steel blades of their attackers on either side. "This can't get any worse," exclaimed Luzben, who immediately realized how wrong he was. For the citadel gate opened, and out came Lucas at the head of an army that, though few in number, more than made up for it in strength. It was composed of giants, Achaeans, and Talads. Also present was Commander Lucer, leading her Amazons. "Attack!" Lucas ordered. Luzben realized too late that he had fallen into a trap. Lucas didn't like killing, but this time he knew there was no other option. But then he saw Luzben in the center of his troops. "Surrender, Lord Luzben. You cannot win," Lucas shouted amidst the fray. The Gore general, who had never known defeat, was truly terrified. "No, if you don't kill me, the ante will," Luzben replied, wondering how the Felusite leader knew his name. "I promise you that if you surrender, we will only take you as prisoners." "There need to be no more bloodshed today," Lucas said vehemently. Luzben turned his head in 3 different directions and knew he was already defeated. "I believe you, Lord Felik. Soldiers, lay down your arms," the general exclaimed. This was an order they never expected to hear from the lips of a Gore general. They had always been taught to fight to the last man. Of course, they didn't want to die. The instinct for self-preservation was innate in all living beings. All the Gores, both Padar and Bunda, laid down their weapons. The 4 armies marched toward the citadel. All the Gores sat around the walls after they were disarmed, under the watchful gaze of the victors. Although this wasn't necessary. If the Gores returned to their people, they would be executed as deserters by order of the ante. Teleni and Desolate escorted Lucas and the prisoner inside the citadel. The group arrived at a room where Sueros was waiting for them. "Hello, Luzben," Sueros remarked. "As I suspected, Lord Lucas defeated you as well." "I thought you were dead," Luzben replied, surprised. "No, but I suffered 2 crushing defeats. First during the invasion, and then at the hands of the other Lord of Felik, whose name is Felix," explained the Gore general, now an ally of Felik. "Please, sit down, General Luzben," Lucas suggested. At that moment, Kamadar and Rados arrived and took their enormous seats. "I see you used your mysterious power on them as well," Luzben said suspiciously. "What power are you talking about, General Luzben?" Kamadar asked. "What other explanation could there be for a Talad like you to go over to the enemy's side?" The Gore general asked. "The reason is much simpler than that. I discovered Euphral's and Chill's treachery. Euphril only contacted me to humiliate me for losing a fight. Later, Lord Zariel told me what the Gores were doing to my people, sacrificing them in their wars. They are driving us to extinction. But you know that, don't you, General?" Kamadar explained, ignoring the Gore's disrespect. That wasn't the reason for his fury. Until that moment, Luzben hadn't given it much thought. Any doubts he had, he dismissed, thinking he was just following orders. The general stammered. "Do you think you can justify what your people are doing to mine?" Kamadar asked him furiously. "Calm down, Mr. Kamadar. We know we're guilty of what you're accusing us of, but we're going to help put a stop to it," Sueros intervened, before things got heated. "Very well. For now, we have a cell for you, General Luzben. Mr. Sueros will explain everything to you in detail," Lucas said. Luzben spoke to his old friend. "I still don't understand how you could turn your back on the Empire. I've seen a lot these past few weeks. I've seen the magnificence of the city of Felik, and I've seen how happy the people of all races are there. I even lived among the Gores, who have lived apart from us for over 2 centuries. They call themselves the Ephors. They developed a civilization whose capital rivals Chill City. But without all that anger and hatred," Sueros explained. Luzben saw that his friend had changed. He saw him much happier than he had ever seen him. "What are these Ephors like? They don't look very different from us, but they are stronger, more agile, and I'm sorry to say, but they seem to be more intelligent than we are," Sueros concluded. "How is that possible?" Luzben almost exploded with indignation. "It's the truth. They are the result of interbreeding between Padar and Bunda. But that's forbidden. It's one of our most sacred laws," Luzben said, still in awe. "Exactly. I, too, have been defeated by them in combat training," Sueros confessed. "But you are the best individual fighter of us all," Luzben replied. "I thought I was. Not anymore. The last few weeks have been a real eye-opener for me. I've come to the conclusion that the Empire as it exists now will only bring about our destruction. as well as that of the talents. It must fall and be replaced by something better, Suero stated. Is everything you're telling me true? All of this seems hard to believe, Luzbin inquired. True, but we always believed that the Empire could never be defeated. However, it has already been defeated 3 times by Felix, and they found it extremely easy to do so. Lord Lucas's stratagems make our best generals look like small children. Well, you saw it with your own eyes. But I'll tell you more. When we invaded Loomis, he wasn't even there. He simply devised a plan and told them to follow. They did so, decimating our army and capturing most of the talents. Afterward, Lord Cameter convinced them to join Felix's army. Luzbin was stunned. How is it possible that mere humans could do all this? The defeated general asked. Everyone in Felix and the Loomis says that those two are no mere humans. I've even heard rumors that they come from another world, Sueros told Luzbin confidentially. Another world? That would certainly explain a lot, Luzbin replied. From what I've been told, they transformed a small human village into an entire nation where all races are welcome, and all in a little over 15 years. The people there love and admire them. Compare that to the Gore people and the Anti, whose family has ruled through terror and coercion. Sueros explained. This is all overwhelming. Believe me, I understand, Sueros said, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. Felix has at his disposal a race so small that at first glance, they look like insects. That's how they received the alert about what was supposed to be a surprise attack. When I arrived, they were prepared, and they defeated my 200 soldiers with about 70 warriors of different races, Sueros explained. When I entered, I saw archers positioned with horizontal bows that had small arrows. I also saw large cauldrons and strange catapults at the top of the towers, Luzbin said, intrigued. Those horizontal bows are called crossbows. They take longer to load, but they have the ability to pierce armor. Those cauldrons contain boiling oil, and if any enemy soldier gets near the wall, it can spill over him. And those strange catapults are called trebuchets. They can throw stones much farther than our catapults, Suero continued. You mean that if we had defeated Felix's armies, we would have to deal with those terrifying weapons? The defeated general asked, horrified. Exactly, but that's not all. I've heard rumors that in Loomis they're working on even more terrifying weapons, as you call them. Of course, they don't trust me enough yet to show them to me. But believe me, the best thing that could happen to the Gore people is for the Empire to be defeated by Felix. I know lives will be lost, but Lords Felix and Lucas will not tolerate unnecessary violence. Suero finished his argument, and Luzbin felt the weight of all the information he had received crash down on him. Meanwhile, a trade route had been established between Loomis and Koresh. As Zariel had indicated, the Shining Cave was a vast source of resources such as lead, sulfates, and other materials necessary for firearms manufacturing. The training of the camp was progressing. The discovery of the light stones, as Peter called them, also proved useful. When a stone is taken to camp with a piece of the cave wall attached, it absorbs light during the day but emits light at night, serving as lamps. Zariel informed Peter that these were living beings. Some of these stones were taken to Loomis and Felix for further investigation. Koresh was invited to visit the colony that bore his name. He liked what he saw so much that he asked permission to stay and explore the region much more extensively. Peter's adopted children had grown a little, although they still couldn't use their wings. All this activity did not go unnoticed by Yufril and Chill, who now approached and examined Felix more closely. But they encountered Zariel, Lumiel, and Talal, this time in their true form, which the other spirits also shared, as flames of light. What are you looking for here, brothers? Are you spying on my friends to tell your slaves? Zariel asked sarcastically. You will not defeat us. You know you cannot harm us, Chill replied. 1,000 years ago, I also believed that, so I began to study our physiology. It turns out we do have weak points that can be damaged with the right amount of energy. Really? Yufril asked mockingly. Now, Zariel shouted unexpectedly. Then, from Zariel, Lumiel, and Zawal, blue rays erupted and entered Yufril and Chill's bodies. For the first time in their existence, they experienced pain, a sensation unknown to them until that moment. What have you done to us? Chill demanded angrily. We have destroyed your energy receptors. You will heal in about 10,000 years. But for the time being, you will not be able to feed on the energy of hatred and anger from others, which you usually feed on. In fact, You will only be able to feed on tiny amounts of energy for that time. Although the system you created promotes hatred and anger, these are now waning among the races enslaved by the Gore. They are seeing that the Gore Empire is not unstoppable. Feelings of hatred and anger are being replaced by hope, which is making Talal stronger than before, Zariel replied. I hate you, Chill said. Please, you two have always hated me. I don't hate you. I only pity you. Now go. Because, in my research, I also discovered how to destroy a spiritual being. You should thank me for deciding to let you live. But for better or for worse, you are family too. It took me 1,000 years to plan this, because I had to do something to at least mitigate the suffering and death you have caused, Zariel replied. Our followers will destroy yours, Yufril said. We'll see about that. Now go, Zariel repeated angrily. A few hours after that, Felix was in his office in Felix. He was waiting for Zariel's signal to lead the rest of his army to Loomis, where they would board several ships to head to the northern part of Trentala. There, his army would join the Turos to attack Tempar, the northernmost Gore city on the continent. Suddenly, he had that feeling he always got when Zariel wanted to tell him something urgent. He sat down on a meditation mat he kept on the floor. When he entered a trance, he saw not only Zariel and Lumiel, but also someone else. Hello, Felix. I'd like to introduce you to my brother, Talal, the Spirit of Hope, Zariel began. Why haven't you introduced me to him before? Felix asked. That's my fault. Although I am the Spirit of Hope, after the destruction of Loomis, I lost it completely, especially in the centuries that followed. There wasn't much hope in Trentala either, where the Gores were committing atrocities. I understand. It's ironic that the Spirit of Hope had completely lost it, Felix replied. But now, after all the victories Felix has had against the Gore Empire, everyone is radiating hope, even the slaves under Gore rule. They realize that the Empire isn't invincible. Rumors of Felix's power are spreading everywhere. Talal replied with great satisfaction. Very well, brother. Please give him the news, Lumiel interrupted. That's what I was getting to. The three of us defeated Yufril and Chill. It turns out that they came to us hoping to spy on Felix. So we executed the plan ahead of schedule. That's right. The plan was to defeat them at the same time as the Annie. But this is even better. By the way, Chorus has finished the small arms and the larger ones he was working on. We'll need them to besiege the Gore capital. When we capture that city, the rest of the populations will have to surrender. Or at least that's what we hope, said Felix. Good, said Zariel. That is what we wanted to tell. See you soon, Zariel concluded. And all three spirits disappear from Felix's sight, and he opened his eyes. Time after that, Felix prepared to leave Felix. Ulia accompanied him, this time as commander of the Amazons. Neres was also with him. The following battles would be decisive. Lazar was also going as commander of the Knights of Felix. Camador was already in Loomis, along with a contingent of Acuns and members of the group, the Shadows, created by Lucas. These were specialists in espionage who teamed up with members of the Kunis. Being so small, they were harder to detect. Although the regular army was going to leave Felix and Loomis, Lucas had created a contingency plan where ordinary citizens served as a militia to prevent the cities and towns from being completely unprotected. Felix and Lucas's families had temporarily moved from their homes to a shelter for their protection. This idea seemed a bit exaggerated on Felix's part, but he didn't want his family to take unnecessary risks. Both Felix and Lucas decided to keep Peter out of the conflagration that was about to erupt. Several days later, he arrived in Loomis with his army. After resting for a day, preparations to set sail began. Felix visited Curris's workshop, which was much busier than it had been months before, to accelerate the production of the new assault rifles. They were a hybrid of the original hunting rifles the brothers had given him and the pistol Peter had given him. They somewhat resembled the old Thompson submachine guns with their rotating drum magazines. Of course, they couldn't fire as many bullets, but the drum allowed for 12 rounds before reloading. Felix asked to try one. Curris had already placed several logs to serve as targets. Felix fired at several of the staked logs. The bullets sank into them, causing them to fall to the ground. Place the targets farther away, Felix told Curris. He and two assistants took the log and positioned it at what seemed a sufficient distance. No, farther, Felix ordered. When the distance satisfied the leader, both Curris and his assistants moved out of the line of fire. When Felix fired, he missed the first shot. Then he aimed better, and the log fell to the ground. You've outdone yourself, Curus, Felix told him. Felix ordered a group of soldiers to practice with these to hone their aim. Excellent, Curus. Now we'll test the other surprises we have for the Gors. All the tests took 2 days. Felix, satisfied, ordered all the soldiers and equipment to be put aboard the Defender and 5 other newly built ships. Finally, they set sail for Anko. They would make a stop there and then continue north to join their army with that of the Turos. That night, the Anti received a visit from Yufril and Chill. They looked somewhat different. Maintaining their Gor forms was difficult for them, as they had expended a great deal of energy creating a portal to warn the Gor leader. We have come to warn you that an army is marching toward Tempar from the north. If you lose that city, the enemy will have great quantities of resources at their disposal. They will be dismantling your empire piece by piece. Asked Yufril, is something wrong, my lords? Armin asked, noticing that his gods didn't seem their usual selves. Neither Yufril nor Chill wanted to admit the humiliating defeat they had suffered at the hands of Zariel and his 2 siblings. That's not important. If you are defeated, you will never see us again. Do you understand? Chill said with true fury. This frightened Armin. All his life, since inheriting his father's empire, didn't had to do anything other than relay their orders to his subjects. There were great treasures stored in his palace, stolen from other races who were enslaved. If anyone opposed him, he simply ordered their execution. He loved having the power of life and death over his subjects. Now he felt that all of that was in danger. After they take Tempar, they will capture Torma. Then they will come here to take your throne. Chill told his servant, what should I do, my lords? Armin asked anxiously. This question caught the spirits off guard. They knew that the 3 armies of Felak were already on their way to the capital, Gor. If Armin sent the army to reinforce Torma, he would leave the Gor capital defenseless. No matter what the Anti did, he would be at a disadvantage. Therefore, they did what they had never done before. That will be your decision, Chill replied. Are you going to deny me your Kusel when I need it most? Armin asked, falling into despair. You are the Anti. Act like one. The 2 spirits said at the same time. Armin awoke and was incredibly worried. Of all the generations of Anti, the Gor had never faced such power as Felix. And now their gods were abandoning them. Was there something important they weren't telling him? But he was the Anti. He had to do something. He summoned his 2 remaining generals, Imtos and Kemtos. They were twins, born from the same egg. At first, they were small, but they grew to climb the ranks until they became generals. They were part of the group, the 4 Greats Ones, along with Luzbin and Sueros. They were quite alarmed to see that the latter 2 hadn't returned from the battlefield. They were used to easy victories against the enemy. Imtos, Torma is about to be besieged by Felix forces. I need you to go and defend it, Armin ordered. As you wish, Imtos replied. Kemtos, you will stay with me to prepare the capital against the attack of 3 Felak armies. The Anti told the 2nd general this orders made the 2 generals feel fear for the first time since they received their positions from the Anti. 3 weeks later, Felix arrived with his army at the village of the Turos, who received him warmly. He brought not only weapons and armor, but also supplies. The excessive hunting by the Gors was decimating the wildlife that reached the valley. Only a few cold-hardy animals escaped and made it to the area. When preparations were complete, the 2 armies, now united, began to leave the village, leaving only a small detachment in case of attack. It was a somewhat excessive precaution, but Felix wasn't going to take any risks with his allies and friends. After several days of marching, stopping only for the night, the army slowly but inexorably approached Tempar. Meanwhile, Imtos arrived at the city of Torma with his army, and the garrison there ceded authority to him as the direct representative of the Anti. The general had besieged many towns, but he had never experienced being besieged himself. I believe there's a first time for everything, he thought as he deployed his troops along the north, south, east, and west walls of the city. There was a large gate at each of the cardinal points. Imtos had never been so tense. He was about to face a power that had defeated Sueros and Luzbin. Of the 5 spies he had sent to observe the battle between Luzbin and Felak, only 1 returned. This spy told him that although Gor had a large army, Felak had 3 small ones, and then another joined them. He had seen them use tactics he had never witnessed, easily defeating Luzbin. The spy fled before seeing the final outcome of the battle, not wanting to be captured like the others. But he assumed that Luzbin had perished. All Imtos knew, or thought he knew, was that the Felic army was made up of many races and that the Felic leaders had brought them under their control. Tempar was a small city without walls and a small garrison. The leader of the city, even though he is a Vados, he was very pragmatic. He knew his small army wouldn't stand a chance against Felic's formidable army, so he capitulated in exchange for the sparing of everyone's lives in his city. Felic kept a garrison there and continued to Torma. Finally, in Torma, the dreaded day had arrived. The defenders beheld this army as they had never seen before. Acheros, Achaeans, giants, Talids, humans, Ephors, and a race they had never encountered. They resembled Rixos, but walked on two legs. All carried weapons and gleaming armor. The first troops to arrive gave the impression of marching past the city, but they halted some distance behind it. After what seemed like an eternity to the defenders, the entire army was surrounding the city, but at a distance beyond the reach of their arrows and their catapults. They've surrounded the city, but they are not attacking, observed the soldier to Emtos's right. He realized they weren't wasting soldiers on the overused Gore tactic of sacrificing wave after wave of troops against the enemy's walls and gates. Then, a human, flanked by 2 Acheros and 2 Ephors behind him, approached the north gate. "My name is Felix, and I represent Felic. I wish to speak with your leader," he said loudly. "What do we do, General?" said the soldier to his left. "Very well, I'll speak with this human," said Emtos. Then he climbed to the top of the wall next to the gate. "Greetings, General Kemptos. Or should I say Emtos? It's difficult when it comes to twins," Felix remarked. This knowledge on Felix's part took the general by surprise. "How do you know about me and my brother?" he asked incredulously. "Generals Sueros and Luzbin are very, very cooperative." Felix praised the generals. "They tortured them to get information," said the soldier to the general's right indignantly, drawing his bow and firing an arrow before his general could stop him. Felix saw the arrow coming and caught it between the point and the tail, leaving all the Gores astonished. "You're an idiot," the general exclaimed, striking his lieutenant with his right fist. He fell to the ground from the impact. "This conversation isn't over," Felix stated, holding the arrow between his index finger and thumb. "You're not here representing anyone. You are the mighty leader of Felic. Or am I mistaken?" Emtos told him. "What makes you think that?" Felix said, feigning innocence. "I've never seen anyone do what you just did. Not even the ante." "You are right. And I am, along with my brother, a leader of Felic. But contrary to your soldiers' opinion, General Sueros and Luzbin were not tortured. We only showed them how Yufril, Chill, and the ante have been deceiving them for centuries." Then Emtos couldn't believe his eyes. Sueros and Luzbin approached, walking side by side until they stood behind Felix. "You are traitors," Emtos yelled. "No, the only traitors here are the ante and the so-called gods," Sueros replied calmly. "You started this war, but we will end it. We only want to live in peace. We don't want any more bloodshed, but we won't stand idly by while you kill and enslave us." Felix intervened. "We will not surrender, no matter what mysterious powers you use," the general said with conviction. "Very well, perhaps you need a demonstration of our power." Felix, his escort, and the 2 defeated generals all withdrew. The latter wore expressions of sorrow on their faces. 20 minutes later, a barrage of fireballs rained down on the entire city from all directions. Trebuchets were strategically positioned to the north, south, east, and west of the city. They were tar-impregnated stones, making them difficult to extinguish. Black smoke was already rising from many parts of the city. "General, this cannot continue. If they keep attacking, they will destroy the city, and us with it," said one Emtos soldiers. "You are right. We have no choice but to surrender." At that, the attacks ceased. The general then saw Felix approaching. "Very well. Do you wish to surrender, or do we have to raise the entire city?" Felix said firmly, though the threat was clear. "Very well, you have my word. We surrender." 2 words Emtos thought he would never have to utter. "Very well. Lay down your weapons and open all the gates so we can enter." The general told his lieutenants to spread the word, and all the gates began to open. All the subcommanders received notification that the enemy had surrendered, delivered by Kunis messengers. The Gores and their Talid allies did not want to surrender, but faced with the devastation of their city, and seeing how well-armed their opponents were compared to their second-rate weapons and armor, Emtos ordered the surrender. "Gore and Talid soldiers, I am aware that if you return to the Gore capital you will be executed as deserters," but you are now under Felik's protection. We will not use you to attack your people unless you wish to help us. You will be free once this war is over, Felix announced. The Gors, who had grown up despising and abusing humans, never thought they would owe their lives to one of them. Then Imtos arrived, his hands bound. The Ante will order my execution for ordering the surrender of our army here, the defeated general stated. Just like your fellow generals and the soldiers here, you too will have Felik's protection. Yufril and Chill fed on anger and hatred, and that is why they created the Gor Empire. To incite the hatred and anger of the other races, they also fostered the hatred of the Vedos towards the Padar and the Bunda through the voice of the gods. Even they don't know they're spreading lies, Felix explained, surprising the general and the soldiers beside him. That explains everything. We've dedicated our lives to glorifying the Ante and feeding Yufril and Chill's hunger for power, the general lamented. That's exactly right, said Sueros, arriving at that moment with Luzben. I thought you two were dead, Imtos said upon seeing them. But don't worry about Yufril and Chill. They've already received what they deserved. And the Ante will do the same in due time, Felix declared. One question. What are those weapons that hurl fireballs from great distances? Imtos asked. Those are our trebuchets, Felix replied. Those are weapons for sowing terror. And I see you also have female soldiers. The general observed as he watched the soldiers and Amazons using dirt to extinguish the fires caused by the attacks on the city. In Felik, everyone is welcome, and that includes the army. If they can endure the 5 months of training, they will be recognized as soldiers, Felix explained. The reason the former generals are free is because Zerial told me it was safe. Besides, they've provided us with valuable information, Felix said. That's true. We've been in communication with Zerial. He's shown us the truth. As a race, both Yufril and Chill use us to foment hatred and anger between the races. The Felik army has healers, something the Gor army has never had. To these spirits, our death is meaningless, Sueros stated. Felik's forces also freed slaves of different races who were in underground prisons, which ironically protected them from Felik's attack. Are we going to be your slaves now? Asked a freed Amsis. No. Now you are free to decide your own destiny without anyone forcing you into slavery, Ulia replied. As the days passed, the Ante and his last general continued preparing the defenses of the Gor capital. Or rather, the general continued making preparations for the city's defense under the Ante's irate and contemptuous gaze. Why aren't those defenses ready, Kemtos? We can't speed up construction when half our army is in Torma, replied the general, worried about his brother. I don't want excuses. I want results, said Armin angrily. I hope Felik gets here quickly just to get this guy off my back, the general thought to himself. Although the Ante was usually harsh and treated everyone with disrespect, this time he behaved worse than ever, trying to mask his fear with a layer of hostility. Summon all reserve soldiers, and even the discarded ones. The discarded ones, as the Ante called them, were soldiers who, instead of being retired when their service ended, were simply left to fend for themselves. But your majesty, most of the discarded will refuse to fight, Kemtos said, in a weak protest. It doesn't matter. The important thing is to put as many bodies between us and the enemy as possible, Armin said. The general knew that when the Ante said, we, he really meant himself. He had always hated serving someone like that, but when he started his military career, it was under Armin's father, a far more capable Ante than the one he had now. Kemtos was aware that this was a bad idea. He knew the discarded soldiers hated the Ante. He was used to hearing stupid ideas coming from the Ante, but lately his ideas seemed far more disastrous than usual, but he had to follow orders. He sent messengers to reactivate the reservists and the discarded soldiers as well. The latter were harder to find because they were scattered throughout the villages trying to survive. When they received notification that they were back on active duty, many refused, but others reasoned that at least they wouldn't starve to death in the army, even if they weren't as agile or strong as before. According to my spies, the Felucites had strange catapults atop their towers, possibly to hurl stones at approaching enemies from afar. They also told me they had large cauldrons high on the walls, but they never saw them in use, Armin explained. It's possible they had some boiling liquid that they would pour on any enemy who came too close to the walls, the general suggested. That's an excellent idea. How long would it take the armorers to build large iron cauldrons? Possibly 4 or 5 days working day and night, Kemtos replied. What could we use to pour on approaching enemies? The ante asked. We have a lot of unused oil. Perhaps that will do. Good idea. I'm glad at least one of my generals is competent, Armin said sarcastically. This comment shocked the general, but he had practiced many times maintaining an impassive face in front of the ante, no matter how offensive the latter became. I have to go oversee the transport of food and water. It's quite possible the siege will last a long time. You may go, Kemptos. He bowed and went in the direction where the food and water would be received and stored. He walked feigning calm, but when he realized he was alone, fury surged through him, and he slammed his fist against the wall, stifling a cry of rage. His brother and his two friends were dead, but that meant nothing to the ante. As he walked, the oracles of the voice of the gods, wearing their distinctive robes, stopped him. Forgive our boldness, General Kemptos. We know you are preparing the city's defenses, but don't worry. Do you have any questions for me? The general replied. Yes. We used to receive messages from the guardian gods Yufril and Chill night after night, conveying their will to us. But we haven't received any messages from them since the war against Felik began. Could it be that they have abandoned us? This revelation shook Kemptos to his core. The truth is, I don't know what to tell you. This is all very strange. Saying this, the general saw a sense of gloom creep across the faces of the priests and prophets. Finally, he too began to have doubts about the indoctrination he had received for years. Until recently, he had firmly believed in the invincibility of the Gore Empire. Every battle against Felik had resulted in a crushing defeat. It was also highly suspicious that no messages had been heard from Yufril or Chill when they transmitted messages daily. Kempto suspected that the ante knew something, but didn't want anyone to know. Meanwhile, in Torma, Felix awaited the arrival of the Volpos, who would join his army before it departed. A day passed, and the Ectos were seen flying on the horizon. The slaves, overjoyed at their newfound freedom, had never seen so many races united in an army. The former slaves were awestruck when they saw the Volpos. They had never seen one before, and they were equally impressed that they could ride these flying beasts. Eber dismounted, walked over to Felix, and extended his hand. Greetings, Lord Felix. Welcome, Lord Eber. We must begin the war council after you and yours have rested. Afterward, all the leaders of the different races gathered to discuss the plan for the siege of the Gore capital. Once assembled, Felix explained the entire plan in detail. But you must be trained with our new weapons. Later, Felix met with the Volpo leaders at a makeshift shooting range. Felix ordered a chest to be brought to them. Then he opened it and took out one of the new weapons. This is called a rifle, Felix told his audience. It looks like a crossbow, but without the bow, Eber remarked. Yes, but instead it fires these. They're called bullets, Felix said, showing a handful of bullets in his hand. Then he began inserting the bullets into a slot on the side of the weapon. There was a click each time he did this. He did it 12 times. Then he aimed at one of the bricks and fired. The blast took those present by surprise, and they jumped. But they managed to see the brick explode into 1,000 fragments. The bricks were placed on small logs, about 20 meters apart, and separated from each other. Nothing remained of the brick. Impressive, said Zimra. You must be skilled in their use since you will have to fire from your Ectos, as we agreed. The Volpos, with their binocular vision, had no problem mastering these new weapons. And yes, they also received training in how to fire while mounted on their Ectos in the air. Felix then showed him the other surprise they had for the Gore. Felix had ordered that the surrendered Gore be placed in the dungeons formerly occupied by slaves. I regret having to do this, he said, but you will be freed when this war is over. The Gore understood, but were more grateful that they weren't executed, as was the custom of the Gore when they took a city to terrorize its inhabitants. The rest of Felik's army was using earth and sand to extinguish the fires caused by the trebuchet shells and water for the other smaller blazes. The imprisonment included Emtos. The Terran who escorted him opened the door to his cell. This will be your residence until I receive further orders from Lord Felix, he said. What do you think Lord Felix will do with us, Gore? Sir, the general asked somewhat apprehensively. Alacker, my name is Alacker. I don't think you should fear for your lives, General. We Terrans used to be enemies of Felik. Well, back when he wasn't called that. Lords Felix and Lucas defeated us, and we were resigned to being executed. But they convinced the other humans to let us live. That was unprecedented. But not only that, they then helped us rescue our people imprisoned by the Giants. Lord Felix defeated the leader of the Giants, and the other giants laid down their arms and followed him. Even though there was resentment between humans, giants, and Akaros, they accepted everyone without reservation, and in time, we followed their example. Gradually, we all realized that the differences between races are only external, Alakar said admiringly. This explanation surprised the general, as did the devotion with which Alakar referred to the two brothers. Wait a minute, Felix defeated a giant without killing him? How is that possible? Emtos asked, astonished. Lord Felix and his brother Lucas are incredibly strong, but also wise. Especially Lord Lucas. In the last 15 years, he has introduced many inventions that have benefited everyone in Felix. Also, all the strategies that the Felix army uses come from him, Alakar said admiringly. Then some explosions were heard in the distance. What's that? Emtos asked. Oh, it's Lord Felix teaching our Volu allies how to use our new weapons. I understand that the projectiles they launch are so fast that they can't even be seen, Alakar stated. Emtos put his hands to his head. He realized the colossal mistake the Empire had made in attacking Felix. He understood that the end of the Empire was only weeks away, and he could only hope that the brothers would be as merciful as Alakar had told him. No Gore general had ever thought of launching fireballs into a city to terrorize its inhabitants into surrendering. They had always used the tactic of launching wave after wave at the enemy until they were defeated. Casualties didn't matter. This Lucas knew not only how to attack the bodies and defenses of his opponents, but also their minds. What your empire did is the equivalent of a child stepping on a larkin's tail, Alakar told him. Emtos lowered his head, dejected even more than before. You're absolutely right, Mr. Alakar. Within the Gore capital, morale was low. The supposedly invincible Gore Empire hadn't been able to win a single battle against Felix. There were even rumors of desertion among the troops. They feared that if they surrendered, they would suffer like the armies that surrendered to the Gores after putting up a fight. The Gores weren't known for their mercy toward the vanquished. They executed leaders without hesitation and enslaved the rest. A life on the run was better than dying in battle or a life as a slave. There were many escapees from Anko, but they fled before Felix's army took the town. So they didn't know what happened after their escape. The enemy is approaching, shouted one of the sentries posted in a tower upon seeing one of the armies commanded by Lucas in the distance. The first army, personally commanded by Lucas, halted before the south gate. Very well, fire the catapults at the enemy, said the Andi. But, Your Majesty, we should allow them to approach closer, said Kemtos, as respectfully as possible. But even so, he provoked Armin's anger. Who are you to contradict me? I am the Andi, he shouted in a fury. Forgive me, my lord. He replied, trying to be as tactful as he could, remembering the words of the previous Andi. Try, if possible, to prevent my son from commanding an army. It would be disastrous. Now he understood these words in their entirety. Armin then remarked, Let's see what you do with this gift I'm sending you. He said it as if Lucas's army could hear him. Andi ordered the catapults to move to the walls and launch their charge against Felix. That took a few minutes. Seeing this, Lucas smiled and simply said, Formation number 5. His entire army then formed several ranks, spaced about 10 meters apart, with a giant at the front, and waited for the enemy to finish loading the catapults. Each of the giants held a large steel hammer. When the catapults finally launched their projectiles, most missed their target, hitting the ground and rolling to a stop. Those that did hit their targets were struck by the giants. Some shattered into many fragments, while those that didn't were knocked off course, away from Felix's army. This left the defenders stunned. When he recovered from his astonishment, the Andi commented angrily, So, you think you're clever? You won't defeat me. Meanwhile, Kemtos realized the implications of what he had seen. Lucas had only spoken a few words. From the distance, he couldn't hear what they were, but they were enough for that entire army to move as one and adopt an effective formation to counter the catapult attack. This couldn't have gone so well if they hadn't practiced it many times. That meant the catapult attack had been anticipated long ago. The only tactic the Gore knew was to avoid being where the stone was going to hit. He never imagined there was an army capable of what he had just witnessed. Now he realized that the Gore Empire was about to be destroyed, and even more so, led by this lunatic he had to obey. Then, behind the first army, another arrived, positioning itself approximately farther away than the first army, but closer to the east gate. These were beyond the range of the catapults. It was composed of Therids and humans on horseback. Behind them came another army, which positioned itself in front of the west gate. Behind each army were several trebuchets that were deployed. Their counterweight system allowed them to launch projectiles farther than the enemy's catapults. Lucas told Samia and two other Kunis, "Tell them to use the trebuchets to destroy those catapults." Each army had at least 3 trebuchets, and their carts carried stones previously coated with tar. The Anti watched these preparations and laughed. "They have very strange catapults. They won't reach us from that distance," he said mockingly. "Respectfully, Your Majesty, I believe their catapults do have the range to destroy ours." Then what the Gore believed were fireballs began to fall from the east, west, and south. Some missed, but the gunners improved their aim. The fragile catapults not only shattered but also caught fire. "Your Majesty, they could burn the city to the ground even without even setting foot in it," the general told him. Such a possibility sent a shiver down Armin's spine. All his life he had been proud of his supposed superiority and his position above all others. "We need a contingency plan. I know. We'll escape to Torma. I regret to inform you of this, Your Majesty, but my spies have informed me that Torma has already fallen, and the army that destroyed it is coming this way. I suspect they have weapons far more powerful than any we have seen." Armin not only feared for his life, but all of Felix's victories over his forces had had a devastating effect on his ego. "Who are these Felucites to oppose me?" he asked to no one in particular. Outside the city, Lucas used one of the telescopes Trantor had given him and observed the eastern part of the city where the large statues of Euphril and Chill stood in their Gore forms. He remembered what Sueros had told him. There is a belief among the Gore that the statues of Chill and Euphril protect the city. This gave him an idea. "Miss Samia, could you take a message to Alades for me?" Lucas asked. "Yes, Lord Lucas." "Good. Tell Alades that I want him to use his trebuchets to destroy those large statues in the eastern part of the city." Samia flew off with the message. Later, the Kuni relayed the message to the soldier who had now been promoted to captain. "We will do so." He had been present when Sueros told Lucas about the lie the two spirits had made the Gore believe. "Good, destroy those statues," Alades ordered. "Lord Lucas, why did you order the destruction of those statues?" "They have no strategic value," Rados asked. "Oh, yes they do. You were late to the tactical meeting. You didn't hear when Sueros said that for the Gore, those statues are a source of protection. Their destruction will show them that Euphril and Chill don't even have the power to protect their own statues." Lucas replied minutes later. A barrage of flaming projectiles rained down on the statues, shattering them. The Gores nearby stared in horror at these symbols of power and authority reduced to rubble. After that, Lucas ordered his army to halt their attack and wait for Felix's army. The Anti had watched the destruction of these objects of devotion from afar and laughed heartily. "That's what they deserve for abandoning us," Armin said with satisfaction. "Did they really abandon us?" Kemptos asked, terror etched on his face. He had already suspected it, but refused to admit it. "Yes, the cowards were defeated by their brother Zariel. They wouldn't admit it, but I suspected it when I saw them trying to maintain their Gore appearance. I know them too well for them to fool me." Kemptos looked at the hopeless expressions on his soldiers' faces. Felix had dealt several devastating blows to the Gore Empire in just a few days. They had prevented the construction of Gore warships, and every conquered city and town would now serve to supply Felix's troops with food and other provisions while denying these resources to the ever-dwindling Gore Empire. Just as Sun Tzu said in a book that Felix and Lucas had read when they were younger, The Art of War. Kemptos then realized the magnitude of the error the Anti had made in his arrogance. The general deduced that Zariel had informed Felix that the Empire would attack sooner or later and that they should be prepared. His concern had turned into genuine fear. His gods had been defeated by Felix, and the Anti, in his hubris, believed he stood a chance against the Felucites. Meanwhile, Euphril and Chill watched helplessly as their supposedly invincible empire crumbled with true frustration. "We should never have supported Armin. The guy's an idiot. If his older brother hadn't died fighting a Larkon to prove his supposed bravery, we wouldn't have this problem. He was far more capable of leading the Gores than that useless fool," Euphril lamented. "We don't know what techniques Zariel developed over these 1,000 years to strengthen his champions and allow his followers to channel their power to heal wounded soldiers. Now it's too late. Everything we have worked for over centuries has collapsed in just a few days. Chill observed with frustration. Let's not lament what could have been. It's obvious Zariel meticulously planned all of this. His followers are far more powerful and intelligent than ours, Chill opined. If you're referring to Armin, I agree. Zariel, who had just appeared, said mockingly. He makes the worms that live under the rock seem intelligent. But the Gors are thinking beings. You deceive them. You built your empire on lies and forced them to make bloodshed and oppression a way of life. All to satisfy your hunger for energy, Zariel told them. Did you come to humiliate us and boast? Euphral asked. No, I just want you to understand how wrong your way of thinking is. Our other and brothers and sisters will be here soon to witness this event, Zariel replied. Then Lumiel, the spirit of love, appeared. Then all the spirits of Zul followed. Kalil, the spirit of altruism. Dislal, the spirit of humility. Talal, the spirit of hope. Beniel, the spirit of inspiration. Raphael, the spirit of selflessness. Grill, the spirit of lust. Trill, the spirit of gluttony. Zrill, the spirit of greed. Zenal, the spirit of sloth. And Tamlil, the spirit of envy. Everyone here is interested in the outcome of this battle, Zalal announced. Please, little brother. Zariel, who's here, already knows how this will end. Chill retorted, unable to hide his fury. True, but I'm not going to spoil the surprise for the others, Zariel replied. Who, had he been in physical form, would have smiled at that moment. Meanwhile, Felix and his army, now augmented by the Volpos, prepared to leave the city of Torma, leaving a garrison behind. The Gors of the city, mostly civilians, were relieved that their worst fears had not materialized. The merciful treatment they had shown to the defeated indicated that they were better off under Felix than under Gor's troops. Besides, the former slaves, now armed, kept them under close watch. Although some might have wanted to attack their former oppressors, they knew that the soldiers left behind by Felix would not allow such disturbances. For there were not only knights and Amazons, but also giants, Terids, Akros, Achaeans, and Achaeans maintaining control of the city. The former slaves knew that this army was unlike any they had ever seen. Lord Felix, said one of them, we used almost all of our fireballs against this city. Don't worry, Captain, said Felix. We'll leave the trebuchets here and take the new weapons developed by Chorus to destroy walls, along with the wagons full of ammunition for those weapons. The army, organized into groups with the same specialties, began to leave the city. The terrain was quite flat, so the different units could move in formation. Even the Volpos moved on land to conserve energy. The immense army, composed of many races and siege engines, moved slowly but inexorably toward the Gor capital. The Turos, wearing the new steel armor provided by Felik, also moved in formation. Their armor gleamed, reflecting the sunlight. Although they were not used to it, having never had a formal army before. 2 days later, Felix's army approached the northern wall of Gor City. Lord Anti, a soldier who had been stationed on the northern wall, reported to his leader, "The army that destroyed Torma has arrived." All the Gors assumed that Torma had been destroyed and everyone had been massacred. Although they no longer received messages from the voice of the gods, they still believed the propaganda about how bloodthirsty and ruthless the Felucites supposedly were. Once the entire army was in position, Felix sent a message to Lucas using Aya, who had been traveling on his shoulder the whole time. Upon receiving the message, Lucas replied, "We're ready. Begin the plan." Aya returned to Felix and said, "Everyone ready." Upon hearing this, Felix dispatched the Volpos wielding the new rifles. They flew 2 by 2 near the remaining catapults atop the towers, and the soldiers in them fired their bows. But the Ectos maneuvered gracefully, and the enemy arrows missed their target. Then the Volpos aimed their weapons at the soldiers trying to load their bows, but the rifles spewed their lethal contents, killing the sentinels. The Volpos knew they didn't have much time. They landed the Ectos on the towers and dismounted. The Ectos began kicking the catapults, and the Volpos used their new steel swords, easily breaking them. Once this was done, they mounted their Ectos and flew away before the enemy reinforcements arrived. Armin and Kimtos climbed to the top of the wall, and then saw the Felucites positioning their cannons in front of the northern wall. "What are those things?" Armin asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know, Your Majesty, but they're pointed at us. We must fall back to the south side of the city, far away from those weapons." All the soldiers, including the Anti and the general, ran as fast as they could. Once they were on the south side of the city, they heard what sounded like thunder. Then they felt the vibrations caused by the impact of the cannonballs. They saw how the walls they had once been so proud of, walls they had believed impregnable, crumbled. They saw the smoking muzzles of the cannons. They saw the devastation they caused, and they panicked. The vast majority of the soldiers, even the discarded ones, decided they could do nothing against such powerful weapons and fled in all directions. Felix and Lucas had ordered that those who fled not be pursued. Then the other armies used their trebuchets to destroy the remaining city gates. They then began to march into the city through the shattered gates. The Ante, with the few soldiers he had left, decided to take refuge in the catacombs beneath the city. These were used to imprison slaves whom the Ante classified as rebels who needed punishment. Felix from the north and Lucas from the south slowly penetrated the city with their armies. The remaining civilians in the city rushed to flee. Then they saw the Ante entering a building, along with Chemtos and some soldiers. So, after unsuccessfully trying to find a way to open the stone door, Felix ordered Rados to smash it with his hammer. When Rados smashed the door to pieces, everyone saw a stone staircase spiraling down. They all descended easily except for Rados, who couldn't fit because the stairs were too low and narrow. "You'll have to wait outside, Rados." "I'm sorry," Felix said, seeing the disappointment on the giant's face. "I understand, Master," Rados said humbly. Felix, along with Lucas and several knights and Amazons, descended the spiral staircase to the lower level. There was a row of cells where various representatives of different races were held. "Free us, mighty Lord of Felix," they pleaded. "How do you know who we are?" Felix asked curiously. "There has been much news among the slaves about your capture of Anko, as well as each and every one of your victories. You have given us hope," said one of the prisoners. This made Felix recall Tal's words. "Thank you for those words. The city is under our control. Whether you want to stay or leave is your decision," Felix said, and ordered a knight and an Amazon to open all the cells. After following a corridor lined with cells on both sides, they finally reached an enclosure illuminated by torches, much larger than those they had seen lighting the cells. All the spirits that had been outside the city were now inside. They were already in the enclosure where the Ante awaited. They didn't want to miss a thing, even though no one could see or hear them. Felix, Lucas, and the others entered the great hall where two statues of Chill and Euphril stood. There stood Armin, Chemtos, and a few remaining loyal soldiers, waiting. "I see the mighty lords of Felix have arrived," said Chemtos. Everyone noticed the sarcasm in his words. "You know, if you had surrendered when we were up there, you would have saved us from coming down here. By the way, my name is Felix," Felix said, smiling. This response enraged the Ante, who was used to having things his way. "Felix, Lord of Felix, I challenge you to single combat," Armin said with great pomp. This alarmed Chemtos. "Your Majesty, that doesn't seem like a good idea," he said timidly, after mentally comparing Felix's physique to the Ante's. "Nonsense. No human has yet been born who can defeat me," said Armin, his chest swelling with pride. "This one isn't like the others," said the general. "All the humans the Ante had defeated were slaves who knew that defeating the Ante would only make things worse for them. So, even though they could have won, they allowed him to win, though they put on a convincing show." Chemtos knew this for a fact, but he went along with Armin. The Ante grabbed a bronze sword he found in the compound, and a shield. "Very well, since you insist, I'll take you up on it." Felix drew his sword, but didn't take a shield. After all, Kendo had no use for one. "You think you can fight me without a shield? Your arrogance knows no bounds," Armin said. "I think the only arrogant one here is you." This enraged the Gore leader even more, and he attacked frenetically with his sword. Felix easily blocked his blows and noticed the dents and bits falling from his opponent's blade. He figured it wasn't very high quality. So he launched a powerful vertical attack, and Armin tried to block it, breaking his sword. Felix took a step back and smiled as he watched the Ante staring at his broken blade. "It doesn't matter. I still have my shield," said the Ante, trying to downplay what had happened. "I suspect you've never been in a real fight," Felix remarked, placing his sword on the ground and pushing it behind him with his foot. "I don't think I'll need this anymore," the Felix leader commented. This time, there was no cutting remark from Armin. He was realizing that he was no match for this opponent, but he wasn't willing to admit it. He saw Felix clench his fists, and the Gore leader noticed the calluses on his knuckles. It didn't take him long to understand what they meant. Felix moved closer, and Armin instinctively raised his shield to protect himself. Felix struck the shield with such force that it shattered. The impact sent the ante sprawling on his back before the astonished eyes of his few remaining followers. Where was the supposed Gore superiority? For years, Kemtos had believed the Gores had reached the zenith of civilization. But then Felix arrived. They had won every battle against the Gores. His spies had reported that Felix's losses in terms of soldiers were minimal, if any at all. His brother and his two friends, Imtos, Luzbin, and Sueros, were the best generals of their generation, yet every single one had fallen to Felix. Your Majesty, I believe we must surrender, the general said. Surrender? The Gore Empire never surrenders, the ante declared. Just as I suspected, your generals are far more intelligent than you, Felix said. They all surrendered when they saw they had no chance of winning. But they are being treated well. Felix does not abuse the vanquished, the leader of the aforementioned nation said. Is my brother alive? Kemtos asked, seeing his despair fade away. Yes, he's in Torma. For the moment, he's our prisoner. General Sueros and Luzbin are keeping him informed of everything, Felix explained. Those traitors, their duty was to die fighting for the glory of the ante, Armin exclaimed. Yufril and Chill betrayed me when they were defeated by Zariel. They didn't honor the deal they made with my family. They would receive the energy of hatred and anger, and my family would receive the riches and slaves the Empire acquired. But you had to ruin it all, Armin said, giving Felix a hateful look. You wanted them to die because of your lies? Felix asked, feeling his anger rising. That's how it had to be. Those lies were necessary to keep them under control. Their lives, and yours too, belong to me to do with as I please, Armin said. But he immediately realized his mistake. This enraged Felix, who grabbed him by the neck with one hand and lifted him up. Felix was about to continue squeezing until he was dead, but then he saw the expressions of anger and indignation on Kemtos' face and those of the other soldiers behind him. I thought about killing you myself, but I'll let your people decide your fate. With that, he threw Armin at Kemtos' feet. The ante struggled to his feet. Then the general and the other soldiers drew their swords and surrounded their leader. Yes, to me. Kill the human, Armin ordered, pointing at Felix, who stared at him with his arms crossed. The first thrust came from Kemtos. Traitor, Armin exclaimed indignantly. The only traitor here is you. You and your family of traitors. As he said this, the other soldiers also plunged their swords into the body of their, until moments before, leader. Armin fell face down, already lifeless. Then Kemtos and the soldiers accompanying him turned to Felix and knelt. As the highest-ranking officer here, I declare our unconditional surrender. Please have mercy on my people, the general pleaded earnestly. Don't worry, General Kemtos. The purpose of our army is to defend our nation, not for conquest. But we do expect the Gore nation to make some changes, Lucas said, having remained silent until that moment. All the spirits silently witnessed everything. They were present, though of course, no one could see them. They all understood that this was the beginning of a profound and radical change in how things had been done up to that point. I must confess something to you, brothers. Even though hatred and anger gave you power, that amount of power it gave you is nothing compared to the amount of power that happiness gives me, Zariel told them. They looked at each other in surprise, but said nothing. Then each and every one of the spirits faded away and returned to their usual activities.